Life has a way of changing in an instant. For me, that moment came 8 years ago, on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was driving to work, preoccupied with thoughts of an upcoming meeting, when everything went dark. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed surrounded by the soft hum of machines and the worried faces of strangers. A doctor informed me I had been hit by a delivery truck and had been unconscious for 3 days. But the real blow came moments later. My lower body was paralyzed, and they couldn't promise I would ever walk again. At 38, with 2 young children, a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son, my world had shattered. My wife's reaction to the news was something I'll never forget. She didn't cry or offer words of comfort. Instead, she stared blankly at the floor and left the room. Looking back, that moment was the first clue that my life was about to unravel even further. Initially, my wife visited me with the kids 3 times a week. Their laughter and hugs were the only thing that kept me going. But the visits grew infrequent. When I asked, she'd blame school activities or feign concern for their health. During those rare visits, I noticed how she'd check her phone constantly and make excuses to leave early. Then, just 6 weeks after my accident, still confined to the hospital bed, I was served divorce papers. "I can't spend my life with someone in a wheelchair," she said, her words colder than the hospital tiles. "I'm too young for this. I need a normal life." Through mutual friends, I later learned she had been seeing someone, a wealthy businessman in his mid-50s, known for his string of failed marriages. Rumors swirled that their affair had begun before my accident. The truth didn't matter. The betrayal was complete. The divorce left me devastated, not only emotionally but financially. My savings were drained, and while insurance covered most of my medical bills, I was left with nothing else. I had no choice but to move in with my mother, a 65-year-old widow running a small flower shop in the suburbs. She welcomed me without hesitation, even as I felt like a burden. When I was finally discharged and attempted to see my children, I discovered my ex-wife had moved in with her new partner and refused to let me visit. "Don't push me," she warned, threatening legal action. I couldn't afford a lawyer. My mother's modest flower shop income barely covered our necessities. The lowest point came when I learned my ex-wife was moving with my children to another city. Desperate, I raced to see them one last time, but by the time I arrived, they were gone. The grief of losing my kids compounded the pain of losing my independence. The first few months back at my mother's house were soul-crushing. I was wheelchair-bound, broken, and dependent. But my mother was undeterred. She began involving me in her flower shop, showing me how to arrange bouquets and interact with customers. Initially, it felt trivial, but slowly, it gave me purpose. I noticed her shop lacked an online presence and corporate connections. I began reaching out to old contacts and pitching ideas to wedding planners and event organizers. Business grew. We started small, flowers for local events, and then expanded into full-scale venue decorations. With every new client, my confidence grew. My hands, though not my legs, became my source of strength. Still, every night, I would sit with old photos of my children, wondering if they remembered me. Life, however, had more in store for me. 4 years after the accident, during a wedding we were decorating, I met her. She was an interior designer working on the venue, and we kept bumping into each other during the setup. At first, our conversations revolved around work, color palettes, and floral arrangements. But gradually, they turned personal. She was a single mom to a 5-year-old daughter, juggling her career in event management. When I mentioned my plans to expand the flower business, she proposed a partnership, combining her event management experience with my supply chain. It was a perfect match. We dated for a year before marrying. Her daughter accepted me instantly, often helping at the shop with unbridled enthusiasm. My mother adored them both, finally having the granddaughter she'd always dreamed of. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Yet, the ache of missing my children remained. Every birthday, every Christmas, I tried to reach out, only to be blocked. My new wife supported me unconditionally, helping me track leads and pushing me to fight for visitation rights. After years of legal battles, I finally won the right to see them for 2 weeks. The day I went to pick them up at the airport, I was a nervous wreck. My daughter was now 14, my son 12. Would they hate me? Had their mother poisoned their minds against me? They were quiet during the drive, glued to their phones. Their confusion was evident when they saw my wife and her daughter at our home. My ex-wife hadn't told them about my remarriage. That evening, she called, furious, accusing me of deceit. I decided to tell my kids everything. I shared my story, how I had fought for them, how I had been left behind, and how I had built a new life while never giving up on seeing them again. The days that followed were a blend of awkwardness and healing. Slowly, they opened up. My daughter even helped arrange flowers at the shop, just as my stepdaughter once had. My son asked questions about my accident, my life, and why I hadn't been around. By the time their 2 weeks were up, something had shifted. They hugged me tightly at the airport, promising to visit again. For the first time since that fateful Tuesday morning, I felt hope, not just for myself, but for the family I thought I'd lost forever. Life has a way of twisting unexpectedly, reshaping everything you know in the blink of an eye. My life changed 8 years ago on a mundane Tuesday morning, a day like any other until it wasn't. I was driving to work, distracted by thoughts of an upcoming meeting, when the world turned black. I woke up days later in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines, unfamiliar faces, and an unbearable truth. The doctor told me I'd been struck by a delivery truck and had been unconscious for 3 days. But the real blow came next. My legs were paralyzed, and the doctors couldn't say if I'd ever walk again. I was 38, a father to 2 young children, a bright-eyed 6-year-old daughter and a playful 4-year-old son. The news crushed me, but it was my wife's reaction that shattered what little hope I clung to. She didn't weep or offer words of reassurance. She stood silently, staring at the floor, and then walked out of the room. In hindsight, that was the moment I should have seen the unraveling of everything I had built. At first, she brought the kids to visit me. Their hugs, their laughter, it kept me alive. But the visits became less frequent. She started offering excuses. The kids were busy with school, they weren't feeling well. During the visits, she barely stayed long, glued to her phone, always in a hurry to leave. 6 weeks after my accident, while I was still confined to the hospital bed, she handed me divorce papers. Her words pierced through me like a dagger. "I can't spend my life with someone in a wheelchair," she said. "I need a normal life." I later learned, through whispers of mutual friends, that she had moved in with a wealthy businessman not long after filing for divorce. Rumors suggested their relationship had started before my accident, but by then, I didn't care. The betrayal burned either way. I was left broken, emotionally, physically, and financially. My savings were gone, drained by medical bills, and though insurance covered most of the costs, I was left with nothing to rebuild my life. With nowhere else to go, I moved in with my mother, a kind but frail woman who ran a small flower shop in the suburbs. Her quiet strength became my anchor during those dark days. When I was discharged from the hospital and tried to visit my kids, I found my ex-wife had moved them to another city. Every attempt to see them was met with threats of legal action. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight for custody. The days at my mother's house blurred into a haze of grief and anger. But my mother, ever practical, refused to let me drown. She began teaching me the flower business, showing me how to arrange bouquets, handle customers, and manage the shop's finances. At first, it felt like a distraction, but soon it became a purpose. I noticed her shop lacked an online presence and any corporate connections. Using my old business contacts, I started reaching out to wedding planners and event organizers, securing small contracts that grew into larger ones. Slowly, the business expanded. We moved from providing bouquets to decorating entire venues. Each success brought a glimmer of hope, though my nights were still haunted by the absence of my children. Then, life surprised me again. 4 years after my accident, I met her. She was an interior designer, working on the same wedding we were decorating. We kept crossing paths during the setup, exchanging polite conversations about color schemes and arrangements. Those conversations grew deeper. She was a single mother to a 5-year-old daughter, juggling her career in event management. When I told her about my plans to grow the flower shop, she suggested a partnership, her event management expertise combined with my floral supply chain. It was the perfect match. Over time, our professional collaboration became personal. We dated for a year before marrying. Her daughter embraced me wholeheartedly, often joining me in the shop, arranging flowers with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. My mother adored them both, finally having the granddaughter she had always wished for. Despite this newfound happiness, I never stopped thinking about my own children. Every birthday, every holiday, I tried to reach out, but my efforts were blocked. My new wife supported me, helping me hire a lawyer and push for visitation rights. After years of legal battles, I finally won the right to see them. The day arrived, and my nerves were unbearable. My daughter, now 14, and my son, 12, barely spoke on the drive home, their faces buried in their phones. When they saw my wife and stepdaughter, confusion clouded their expressions. Their mother hadn't told them about my new family. That evening, she called in a fury, accusing me of deceit. I decided it was time for the truth. I told my children everything, how their mother left me in the hospital, how she moved in with her wealthy partner, how I tried repeatedly to see them but was met with restraining orders and rejected custody appeals. They listened in silence, tears streaming down their faces. My son admitted he once found me on social media, but his mother caught him and made him promise never to contact me again. They spoke of feeling like outsiders in their stepfather's house, of being treated differently because their mother wasn't officially married to him. That visit changed everything. We went on a family vacation, and they slowly opened up. They bonded with their stepsister, helped in the flower shop, and grew close to their grandmother. When they posted photos of us online, their mother called in a rage, accusing them of betrayal. Amidst all this, my lawyer had been fighting an old battle, seeking compensation from the delivery company responsible for my accident. After years of court proceedings, we finally won. The settlement was substantial enough to secure my children's education and more. That's when my ex-wife showed up. She looked older, standing in my office doorway, but her face was unmistakable. She began crying, talking about regrets and mistakes, begging for forgiveness. She confessed that her relationship with a wealthy man was nothing more than an arrangement. He wanted a companion, not a wife, someone to accompany him to events and manage his home. In return, he paid for her lifestyle. Her justification infuriated me. "You could have given me a chance," I said, my voice trembling. "We could have figured it out together. But you abandoned me when I needed you most." She kept talking about our past, but those memories felt like echoes from another lifetime. When she crossed the line, dismissing my wife and stepdaughter as not my real family, I saw her for who she truly was, a selfish person unchanged by time. I had to threaten to call security before she finally left. My children, now fully aware of her manipulations, chose to move in with us shortly after. They thrived in their new environment. My son showed a flair for event design, helping in the business, while my daughter became inseparable from her stepsister. My mother watched it all with a quiet smile, often reminding me that everything happens for a reason. She was right. My accident, as devastating as it was, had led me to rebuild my life, find true love, and reunite with my children. It taught me that life's greatest challenges often reveal its most profound blessings. Happiness doesn't come from walking. It comes from having people to walk beside you, whether you're on your feet or in a wheelchair.